guys! So today's video is going to be a really cool one because I'm actually collaborating with the amazingly talented Alba. If you are not familiar with her art, I'm going to go ahead and just put her Instagram feed right here so you can just marvel at the amazingness that is her art. And I'm also going to link her Instagram and her YouTube channel in the description box below, so please go give her a follow on Instagram and subscribe to her on YouTube. She makes amazing videos. But today we are actually designing a tarot card, and so the way this works is we together created a series of polls that we posted on Instagram, and basically our Instagram followers voted and determined things like the meaning of the card and the sort of general look and feel of the card, the vibe of the card, and some characteristics of the actual character that would be on the card as well. And what we ended up with is a prompt list. And so these are the prompts that we are both going to be working on as we design this card together. So we're each going to be designing our own version of the card, and we're actually designing it without looking at each other's work. So we thought this would be a really fun way to kind of show how two different artists can have, like, how different the creative process is, you know what I mean? Because, you know, we're both working off of exactly the same prompts, and we're gonna end up with illustrations that are like so different. And it's just really interesting to see how, especially when you're working with something kind of like tarot, where symbolism and all of like the colors you use and the imagery you use in the card, it like plays such a big role in the card. And how it's interpreted. So it's just gonna be really interesting to see like how we take these prompts and try to visually represent them. So I'm going to show you her illustration right now. It's right here. And if you want to see how she created this and also learn a little bit about her creative process, I'm going to link her video right at the top of the description box. Please, please, please go watch it after you finish this video. So I guess we can just get started on my drawing now. So for me, especially when I'm working off of something as specific as a prompt, the first step for me is always very much just in my head, visualizing ideas. So what I basically do is I just kind of keep those prompt ideas in the back of my head, like as I go about my day. So I'm not like actively thinking about it, but it's just kind of there so I can, you know, ideas will just come up. Personally for me, I find that, you know, I get most of my ideas when I am doing other things. If I sit down and I like concentrate on like coming up with an idea, that's exactly when I'm not going to get ideas. So it just works best for me, and a lot of times I'll just like get a visualization of an idea, and I'll either kind of jot down notes or something on my phone in the notes app, or like on a sticky note or something, or I'll even do like a little tiny super rough thumbnail. These are like so rough that most people probably wouldn't be able to tell what they are, but I can because I know what the idea was in my head. So I'm not even going to show you guys that. But yeah, so that is the first step for me. So the next thing I wanted to figure out before I actually got into thumbnailing and illustrating is kind of the mission I wanted to accomplish with this card. And I wanted to take into account the way that I personally read tarot to do this. I definitely prefer cards that are a little bit more symbolic, a little bit more minimal, rather than a card that literally depicts exactly the meaning of the card. You know, I do read very intuitively. I take the kind of by the books meaning of each card into account, but for me, like my gut instinct, or like the first thing that pops into my head when I see the card, or the first thing that my eye is drawn to when I see the card, that always takes a priority in terms of my readings and how I interpret the card. So I wanted to keep that kind of mindset in mind when I was creating my own card. You know, of course, I wanted to represent the prompts and I wanted to make it clear that, you know, this is the meaning of the card, but I also wanted to leave a lot of it open for interpretation. I wanted to have a little bit of a gray zone, like something that can be interpreted in many different ways depending on who's looking at it, when they're looking at it. You know what I mean? You know, so stylistically, I know I wanted it to be a little simpler because I don't want when you look at the card, the first thing, like, just overload with details. You know, you just like, where do I look? Whoa, 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 so many details. Like, I wanted it to be pretty clear and just lots of symbolism in there, but not necessarily a lot of detail that kind of takes away from that meaning and takes away from the symbolism. So for me, that process really starts in the thumbnailing phase. And for me, thumbnailing is not so much about figuring out like the technical aspect of the pose. It's more about figuring out like the shapes that are used, like breaking the body down into the shapes, but also thinking about how things flow in the piece. Figuring out the movement, figuring out where the eye travels when it looks at the piece, and kind of just getting all those lines working together. And especially with tarot, you want to be able to draw the eyes with certain lines, draw attention to certain aspects of the piece, and so on. So for me, the thumbnailing is very important in that sense. So I guess now I just kind of wanted to sort of talk about the things that I was trying to bring out in this piece and like the symbolisms that I was trying to use, and sort of what basically inspired this and how I took that little bit of inspiration and kind of turned it into an overall drawing, I guess. So for me, when I first heard the list of prompts and we figured out what it was, the thing that came to mind first was a collector. This idea of someone who collects something, and you know, that kind of does tie into the prompt of bringing things together. So I was kind of stuck on that idea. So in my mind, I was thinking, okay, what does she collect? Why is she collecting them? And I was a little inspired by kind of like the wand imagery in like traditional tarot decks, especially like the Rider-Waite deck and stuff like that. So I was kind of inspired to do someone who's collecting these just sticks, you know. There's nothing special about them. They're literally just these lifeless sticks. And, you know, to be able to collect something that is someone else's, you know, just trash that they're just gonna walk by and not care about, and to be able to turn it into something new, to be able to grow something out of that, I thought was a really nice kind of message. So that's kind of what I was building on as the very initial idea for this. So as you'll see, she on one hand she has the sort of just dead sticks that she's collected, and on the other side they're starting to grow leaves and everything. And then I also wanted to use the idea of ghost hands, and I had played with the idea of having ghost hands, like just hands, you know, ghostly hands being around her, that kind of cool imagery with all the hands everywhere. But I kind of wanted her to have the ghost hands. And you'll see later on in the drawing that they actually are like ghostly and see-through and stuff. You can't really tell here too much in the sketch phase. But yeah, I wanted her to actually have the ghost hands and have it be a part of her. So I kind of liked the idea of someone who is in some ways broken themselves, being able to kind of heal something and to fix something and to create and make life with something. I kind of liked the sort of contrasts there, and I thought it was a really nice kind of a hopeful message, I guess. You know, we all have things in us that are a little broken, but we don't always need to see that as 100% of a bad thing, and you can make something with you know, even something that feels like it's bad or it's not good about yourself, you can make something out of that and use it to your advantage. So I wanted to kind of bring that across with this. And I also liked the idea of the ghost hands being a symbol for the spiritual energy. Spiritual energy was one of the prompts for this drawing, as opposed to say like physical energy or earthly energy. So I liked the idea of these ghostly hands being a manifestation of her spiritual energy, and she's using her spiritual energy to actually create physical change in her world. So that was a little bit of the symbolism in there, and I actually had a bunch of other ideas in the thumbnail phase that you guys probably saw. Like I had the idea of her hair kind of going down and flowing down and then kind of sprouting up as like plants or something. But I actually ended up abandoning that, again, going back to this sort of simplicity's sake. I felt like it kind of cluttered the ideas a little bit too much. I didn't want there to be too much going on in this drawing. I wanted it to be very clear and to the point, definitely have a lot of symbolism there, but I didn't want it to be too cluttered. And I also felt like having the hair go all the way down to the ground, it kind of broke up the lines. And I did actually want to add these sort of diagonal lines going down to kind of just draw the eye to certain places. And you can interpret that as water, you can interpret that as just, you know, something drawing the eye to a specific place, however you want to do that. And I just thought it worked better. And sometimes, you know, when you're drawing, we always have like all these ideas, and I feel like that's a problem, at least for me. Like I have too many ideas, and being able to sort of parse back those ideas, to simplify all the ideas, all the awesome ideas you have into, you know, something that's a little bit more concise. It's hard, you know, like we just want to throw all our ideas at the drawing because, you know, I'm sure all your ideas are great ideas, but, you know, sometimes it definitely helps to make the point clear if you kind of, you know, pull back a little bit and just let a few ideas make a big statement, I guess. So the next piece I had to figure out was actually the animal companion, and for me this is something that I had to kind of think pretty hard on to decide on the animal, because there's so many cool animals, right? So I ended up going with this, I don't know if you would want to call it a crane or a heron. I don't think it's necessarily 100% like scientifically correct interpretation of either of those birds. I looked at a few reference pictures, but not too much. But I guess I'll leave that up to the beholder, whether it's a crane or a heron or whatever you want to call it. But there's a few reasons why I actually decided on this bird, and number one was compositionally. I wanted an animal that would be able to be kind of tall and continue that diagonal line sort of thing that I have going on in the piece. So I wanted it to be able to sit behind her and be taller than her, which is why I decided to pick a bird with very long legs. But symbolically, in a lot of cultures, the crane does represent like luck or good fortune, or you know, all of the sort of positive vibes that we were trying to get across with this card. And then I guess I was pulling off of my own personal experience as well. I grew up living very close to the water, and we would always go out on like the creek and stuff in the boat, and we had a lot of, they were blue herons that we had, and I don't know, I always saw them as very kind of mystical birds, I guess, almost like these wise ancient protectors. They just kind of stand there, and it's almost like they're watching over something. They're very cool birds. So I kind of wanted to have a little bit of that element, but again, that's my personal experience, so that's how I would interpret this card. But you guys might not have that experience, and your experience with this bird might be completely different. But I wanted to throw in, you know, my own experiences into the card and how I represented it, and so that's why I ended up going with this kind of crane heron thing. So the last piece I wanted to talk about is actually the color scheme, and the poll conveniently decided that we were going to be using a primarily blue color scheme, which actually worked out perfectly. I don't know about you guys, but I associate certain colors with certain things, and for me, the color blue is very much associated with spirituality, spiritual energy, and also kind of peacefulness. I find it to be a very peaceful and calming color. So that ended up working perfectly with the other prompts, but I knew I wanted to throw in a little bit of a contrasting color to kind of draw the eye a little bit, so it wasn't all just like all blue. So I decided to go with some complementary colors because I love me some complementary colors, and I added a little fire above her head and a halo around the crane heron bird thing, and I mostly did that to kind of create a sense of wisdom around these characters. I wanted them to feel like kind of spiritual teachers or spiritual guides, someone who has a lot of knowledge that they can impart on you, as opposed to just like two random people sitting in a pond or whatever, you know what I mean? So that's why I actually went with that. And the last thing I did is I brought the drawing into Procreate, and I just did a little bit of work. I added some kind of, I guess, wind gusts into the background of the sky, and I also wanted to create a little tiny bit of separation between her and the kind of foreground and background, so I added a little bit of a white outline in places that I felt like we needed a bit more separation. And yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of my process, guys. I'd actually be super interested to hear like how you guys would interpret this card. And I mean, I guess it's probably kind of hard to do now because I've been blabbing on about how I would interpret it, but just kind of let me know sort of the vibes you get from this card, any kind of messages you might get from the card. I honestly find it so fascinating how different people can interpret a single card and how many different meanings you can get from that card. So I would love to hear your ideas and your interpretations. I think that would be so cool. And now I just wanted to show the two pieces next to each other. How cool is that? I think that they look so cool next to each other, and I love how different they are too, but like still complementary. Again, guys, please go check out ALBA'S video once this one is going to be over, and yeah, go give her some love, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!